I'm Kaberi Dasgupta. I'm a physician scientist here at the McGill University Health Center, and I'm Associate Professor of Medicine at McGill University. And I guess for this interview, my leadership role is as Director of Clinical Epidemiology.
I am the President and CEO of a firm called BIMCOR. BIMCOR is the asset manager of the pension plan for Bell Canada and its related companies.
Yeah, I've worked 15 years, well 17 years in the aerospace industry. I'm very passionate with everything that relates to aerospace.
I wanted to be my own boss. I wanted to have complete control over my environment, and I decided to co-found MTL Capital. So that was back in early 2013. And I've been a partner here ever since.
I teach a class called Introduction to Social Entrepreneurship and Social Innovation. And I say that I would pay to teach the class, just don't tell McGill.
And I came across a government program called Bourse d'Affaires, which would guarantee a loan for you if you had some kind of business idea. And so I got my friend involved to come join me in this concept, which was very simply to sell novelty type clothing to gift stores. And we ended up actually, getting this loan program. We had to prepare a business plan for it, and that was kind of the seed of how the company was born.
So the whole idea of Vimalia is exactly that, is getting a seed. So the logo is dandelion. It's a dandelion because the dandelion is one of those rare plants that when the seed goes somewhere, it becomes its own plant by itself. It doesn't need to be merged together with another plant. So our idea is put little seeds wherever we can and hope that grows. So rather than me going and working in an NGO and having that NGO blossom, I'm thinking of maybe I can multiply our impact by doing it in different organizations.
Well, generally, because I think what makes the world move forward, is leadership, is influence. It's how people get mobilized. So you think of great leaders or a ton of leaders that you have around yourself that inspire you every day, influence what you do, and so on. This is like, to me, like the engine, that puts everything in motion. So I think leadership is fundamental in everything that happens, on the planet.
So, well, I think it's an interesting question. I know leadership as a concept has had a lot of press, a lot of attention lately. I know here, for example, at McGill University, I was part of a leadership workshop for a couple of days a couple of years ago, and so it's a concept that seems to be quite important.
The concept of, in today's environment, in most industries, leadership is essential, that it encompasses the ability to create a nimble, flexible organization.
Of course leadership is important. Leaders get a lot of things done, and leaders galvanize people to work towards common goals. So leadership is important. I think the values that drive leaders is actually more important. And I think that there's a lot of room in education generally to spend more time developing values that make for great leaders than to develop the skills that are apparently important for leaders to possess. So that's what I would say about that.
I would say to you, it's interesting. I grew up, I think the world has changed today a lot. I think one today has to be ready to accept and embrace change and grow with it, because I think it will continue to change more rapidly than it has, for example, when I got out of school. One of my biggest beliefs, and I continue to believe this, is it's just as easy to get ahead in life being nice to people than it is to try to be authoritarian, you have to be firm, but you have to be fair in order to be able to lead people. It's not always, you're not going to make it a holiday camp, but by the same token, I think being nice to people it's served me incredibly well.
You know, when you ask about leadership, what's important as a leader, I could give you all the 5 things of when you're in a company, this is how you lead people. That's not what I want to focus on. The first one is in order to be a leader with different people, you have to lead your own life first. That means you have to take care of yourself. You have to be aligned. Because as I said, it took me 10 years to feel like I was truly aligned with my core. Because I was being a leader externally, but I wasn't leading my life. I wasn't taking care of myself. So I didn't take care of myself physically as well as I should have. Emotionally, obviously, I was very good. I mean, with the kids and the family and all that. But still, I didn't take care of my own emotional needs. So take care of yourself. And the more you take care of yourself, the more you know yourself, and the more you take care of yourself, the more you're able to give to others. And so if you're centered yourself, your team around you will be more centered. You will surround yourself with the right people to complement you. You will be able to have that impact and create the vision and focus on the results of that vision, because you will be aligned and you'll be firm, feet grounded, you know, rather than just trying to move in different directions. And when you become a leader, if you've taken care of yourself, if you've addressed your own needs, and if you're centered, being a leader won't be about you. It'll be about others. And that's what I believe a leader should be. I believe a leader should be a selfless leader, where they're thinking about themselves, they're putting themselves in a position where they can give back, but it's not about them.
While we'll all be followers at different moments in our lives, we'll also all be leaders at different moments in our lives. And sometimes that's an official role, and sometimes that's more an unofficial role. It's situational. So what I think it's something that's often task specific, and it requires an ability to assemble people towards a common purpose. And in order to do that, I think ideally one needs to be a good communicator and a good listener to understand what the common purpose is. One needs to be able to be empathic but still quite organized and have a clear idea of the goals that you as a leader want to move towards, and then see if these align with what your group wants to do too.
Again, another essential ingredient of being a good leader is you have to be a good listener, and you have to ask great questions. And so it's when you meet someone, and it's I have anybody you come into contact with. I'm sure there is something in their life that could provide some dose of inspiration to you that somehow can form a part of your leadership DNA. And so for me, it comes everywhere. It's I was blessed to have, up until recently, I was blessed to have a 99-year-old grandmother who passed away 5 days before her 100th birthday. But the amount of blessings and the amount of teachings, just spending time with her and just asking questions, again, is just as important or more important than whatever I'm going to read in a book or go to a seminar.
Empathy is crucial to leadership. So I have a really particular way of seeing empathy. There's a lot of words that get used synonymously. So pity, sympathy, compassion, empathy, those words are often used interchangeably. They're not the same thing. And I situate empathy along a continuum. So I have pity on one side, sympathy, compassion, and then empathy. And pity is really, there's a power differential embedded in the relationship when you pity somebody. You look down on them, oh, you poor person, I pity you. But as you make your way along the continuum, you get to empathy. That's where I think there's a lot of power. And so I think that leaders who are working with other people need to have empathy present in all of their activities and all of the way that they show up in the world, because it really is respecting that everybody is deserving of equal dignity and rights. And that could be within an organization or within a movement or within a family or within a community. So it's essential.
If you want to be a good leader, I would say be credible. Okay? be interested in whatever, whether it's, and leadership is not only at work, right? It's personal life, it's activities, it's work, it's everything. But some people would say if you're a good leader, you could lead anything in any domain and so on. I would say yes and no. I would say, so what you're doing now, like, if we talk about the students, first year students, I think going to school to me is very important because it gives you a trade. It gives you, language. It gives you some a basic foundation that you will be able to work on later on. So if you choose a domain that you like, you'll probably get into more depth in what you're learning there, and that will help you for the rest of your career. It make you credible, in the fields that you will study. And then it's what you're going to learn through your experience. Are you going to be interested? There's a saying that says people care how much you know until they know how much you care, right? And I would tend to agree with that. When you join a new organization, I've been in different businesses. I've led businesses here in Quebec. I've been 4 years in Singapore, leading a service center there. I'm back now, And whenever you get into a new organization, you always have this feeling of, sometimes you feel you're a bit challenged and the fact that you don't know every detail of what your people are doing in your organization. But really what they're telling you is be interested in what we're doing.
One of the struggles that I've had as a leader is that it happened once in my life that I was very passionate about something and was effective as a leader in this particular project. And because of a different way of seeing the progression of the work by somebody with whom I worked, I allowed myself to second guess myself in a way that actually diminished my own capacities and my own personal value and contributions. And I stayed in that headspace for a little too long and actually didn't feel good physically about it, which is a telltale sign that something's wrong. And it wasn't until I had a little bit of distance that I actually pivoted on how I looked at the situation and realized that there was just a different way of working and a different lens to look at the work, and that I wasn't actually, that my work was not inferior by comparison, it was just different. But I had allowed myself to feel that it was inferior as a result of different conversations. So that was a big challenge for me and a really great learning lesson to actually have humility, know my blind spots, where I can improve, where I can learn, but to fundamentally appreciate that my contributions are sincere, I'm earnest in the work that I do, I work hard, and that to never lose sight of my own personal value.
Since you will, as a leader, you want to influence different people. That means you're working with different people that have different personality, different belief, and so on. And it's how, with time, you develop this sense of being able to bring all these people to be comfortable and inspired to follow your lead, whether they look like you or not, whether they think like you or not, that's also leadership. And I think, if you have the open mind to go and make that learning, I think broad leadership is accessible to about everybody. But you have to be open-minded, because if you want to go your way, you will only inspire, a small number of people. If you want to adapt your way without losing your nature, still following your passion, then I think you can influence a larger group of people.
I would say definitely the level of pressure that I feel now is different. I think when I was at RBC, I definitely felt pressure to perform, but I would say ultimately it was always someone else's responsibility, or the end responsibility was always someone else's. Whereas now, end of the line, every decision that I make has to be representative of what I think, and if it's a good decision, I get all the credit, and if it's a bad one, I get all the pains in that. So I would say, how did I deal with it? Probably the simplest way I can answer the question is I made probably a lot of mistakes along the way and felt pretty incompetent for the first 9 months that I was running MTL Capital.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, I grew up. I was a pretty introverted kid. I mean, most people would say that's hard to believe today, but I was. I was. I wouldn't have been the kid back when I was, in elementary school or high school that people would say, "Hey, this guy will be a real success when he grows up." That probably would not have been me. And it's. I would say it was probably when I got out of CJEP and started going into university that it really, maybe a turnaround started to take place. I can't say there was a catalyst that would have, made that happen.
Well, a couple of things. In the third year of my undergrad, I went to see a film that really changed my life. It was called The Vienna Tribunal, produced by the National Film Board of Canada. There had been a human rights conference in Vienna for 5 days, and one day was devoted to women's human rights. And so this film was essentially a compilation of women giving testimonials at the United Nations about the plight of women in their country. And I was stunned not only by the injustices that I was learning about, but also that I had never been exposed to them and had never heard that these things were going on. So that changed the course of my life quite a bit.
Coming from divorced parents at a, important development in my life. So I was 10, 11 years old and parents get divorced. And, my mother was a very hardworking and determined to, now she had to, raise my sister and myself on my own. And so I kind of took some initiative at a young age to help out in the house. Mm-hmm. And, maybe some challenges along the way with my sister. And so I began to just become a little bit maybe more independent than most kids are at that age. And so, for me, there's a certain amount of just, I guess, autonomy and independence that came out of, my upbringing in my teen years. And so I ended up realizing that I was going to have to really go after what I wanted to go after. A certain amount of conviction that came out of that experience for me.
Mm-hmm. I was also in the Air Cadet movement at the time, so this was kind of my first, experience with the military at the time, which also gave me opportunity to start to experiment a little bit about leadership, because there's some notion of leadership, obviously, when you get into this kind of paramilitary activities, and that's where I started to realize that, hey, leading people is something that can be interesting, and I felt, maybe I could influence people.
When I was growing up, I was a much more introverted kid, and probably one of my greatest experiences at McGill was a student exchange program that I did in Milan, which I think was a pretty amazing developmental experience that helps you definitely get to know different cultures and get to know different people. And I think there's amazing leadership challenges that you can face when you're in a country where you don't know anyone and you don't know the language even.
I had lived all this 20 years of work. I had put money aside, like the right thing to do, for education, for my kids, for RSPs, for pension, all of that. And it will not matter if I die in 3 years. It won't matter. It'll matter for my kids, but it won't matter for me. How do I fulfill my destiny? How do I find my purpose and do something about it? So I accepted at that moment that I would not go back to IMS. And I said, if I only have 3 years to live, I got to do what I've been wanting to do.
McGill University is a research-intensive university, which means that we have a remarkable array of academics who are doing incredible research and really pushing the envelope in every single discipline that the university covers, but are not necessarily great teachers. And I think that students who study at McGill are exposed to incredible brains doing incredible work, but are not necessarily engaged by the material because they don't have great teachers. So I would recommend to students who are first year at McGill is to choose classes based on the professors giving them, not based on what the subject title is or what the description of the actual class is. I think if they shopped around for teachers that have really great reputations among students as effective, compelling, dynamic, engaging teachers, they're going to get so much more out of their experience at McGill.
I was still, pretty young. I was 27 or 28 when I was given my first profit center responsibility. So it was, 140 employees. I was in Singapore. I was general manager. So I felt pretty confident because until then, everything had gone pretty well for me at work. So it was like from one success to the other, it was pretty much a flawless kind of course, And I took this business, which had some, difficulties, pretty serious difficulties. And within 6 months, I've pretty much, I would say I've almost crashed that business. Right? And it was the first time that I really hit a wall or had, a major failure, in my system. And there was one guy, from the head office, okay, very experienced leader, who'd been there as my coach. Had been presented to me as my coach in that new GM position. He was supposed to be my safety net, but as a young leader, ambitious leader, I didn't need that guy, right? And so I essentially pushed the guy out my circle. And when I crashed the business, which is not a good thing, as a general manager, you you might not survive for too long when that happens. It's the first thing that came to my mind, But I recalled, the day where the business really got bad, And I came back home and I thought of that guy and I realized that this guy was trying to help me. Genuinely help me, okay? And I was continuously turning him around, pushing him back, trying to show I don't need to listen, okay? I don't need to learn. That's what I was telling him. I walked on my pride and I called him, and he was still there, and he helped me to get out of that. So that was big learning. So I say, learn early to listen. It's so important. This is going to open the door for everything that would come after.
For some people, they can do that. They can, it's natural to them to get out of their comfort zone. For other people, it's a lot more difficult or a lot more scary. I'm somewhere in the middle. So for me, yes, I definitely think it's important, and for sure. But I understand why people hesitate also, because it's a lot more comfortable to just stay in your lane. But it is important. It is important to get out of it.
Don't worry about being a leader. Worry about what you're passionate about and cultivate some kind of passion, and then get the necessary training to let you pursue that passion. And once you've gotten the experience and skills to pursue it, then the leadership opportunities may come. So not to become preoccupied with becoming a leader, but to make sure that you, in pursuing your passion, develop and cultivate the ability to work as a team member, to get along well with others, to listen to them, to be able to figure out, to not be too tied to your own solution for a problem, and to be able to listen and figure out what the best solution is. And so as you go through your evolution and training, you will, I think, become more skilled potentially as becoming a leader if you can just learn to be empathic, organized, focused, and hardworking. And if you can do those things, then the opportunity to be a leader will fall on you. But the key skills, which are one's principles, one's passions, and one's organization and one's hard work, those are basically requirements for everybody.
Yeah, I think that that you sort of evolve into a new level as you grow, and as you keep being given challenges, you embrace them, and not all. Some challenges are great. The adrenaline starts going. You embrace it. You run for it. You try to make it happen. You want to succeed at it. I think that's a big part of it. Is the desire. I've always said, give me someone with a ton of desire and little knowledge, and I will be able to take that person and shake them and get them down a path. Give me someone with a lot of knowledge and very little desire, and you're not going to go very far.
Don't walk around with any sense of entitlement. Don't walk around with any sense of entitlement. You have to have an extremely good work ethic. You have to be, and anybody in my situation or anybody in a position of leadership, also they're looking to see who is going to be, proactive, who's going to take initiative, who really at the end of the day cares the most.
I would call it be a smart chameleon. Okay, and I'll explain what I mean by being a smart chameleon. We all know chameleon, would change color and so on. Okay, at one point you learn to listen and so on, but then at one point you also realize that your personality, you might be more of a authoritative style, more of a democratic style and so on. And it works in certain situations, but then you get in other situations where it doesn't work. And you start to realize that, and then with help, and coaching, because now you're a listener, so you want to learn, you realize that you need to adapt your leadership. You need to adapt to situation, you need to adapt to people, you need to adapt to context and so on. And you learn tools how to do that. And as you experiment these tools, sometimes you feel like someone is trying to change your nature. You realize that it's being a leader is not always being your 100% your natural. You have to start to adapt yourself, and that's it takes energy to do that. It takes energy to adapt to situation and context, and it's another skill set. You have to learn tools and be able to, depending who you're talking to, be able to size the person and adapt your speech and so on, so that you will also inspire that person, that you will engage that person, not the way you would like to be engaged, in a way that that person likes to be engaged, and the way that works for that person.
I think we're in a world today where opportunities abound on a global basis, but opportunities, if you look at the Montreal area, for example, it's going to be very competitive. It's a highly competitive marketplace. You have a lot of people with less opportunity to move ahead, unless they're niche oriented. So I think people have to be able to be adaptable. They have to really know what they want to do and then go for it.
I would say probably one of the most interesting pieces of advice that I received when I was starting my career was a quote that someone gave me where they said that people won't necessarily remember what you say, but they'll remember how you made them feel. And I think that's kind of the way that I try and live my life. I think rewarding people that give you their best and helping inspire people to be at their best, I think is what leadership is all about. And ultimately, I think understanding your strengths and your weaknesses, and that self-awareness can be the most helpful part of leadership development. And I think once you understand yourself and you understand how to interact with people to make them feel great and elevate their game, I think you're well on your way to becoming a great young leader.